What proof or connection is there between Constantinople, modern day Istanbul in Turkey, and ADRAMY, the son of Solomon? The Kebra Nagast says, and they blessed him and they blessed him as they had blessed David his brother. David the second, not David the father of Solomon, but David the second, who is the son of Solomon, who is the who became the king of Ethiopia. So they blessed Adrami as they blessed his brother David the second, the son of Solomon, and admonished Adrami even as they had admonished David, and they accompanied him on his way as far as the sea coast. Now, most people know David, the son of Solomon, as Menelik, 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 or Ibn al Hakim, right? Son of the wise man, and Menelik, right? That's the name that most people are aware of. The son of Queen Saba, Nagist Saba, and Solomon, Nugus Solomon. So Solomon called Menelik or Ibn al Hakim. He called him David because he said, "Hey, you look just like my father, David. My father David has risen from the dead." Right? So that's why the Kibber Nagast refers to him as David. Okay, so they blessed Adrami as they blessed David his brother, and admonished Adrami even as they admonished David, and they accompanied him on his way as far as the sea coast. Because remember, they gave Menelik the same, they bid him farewell, and they said, "Hey, make sure that you keep the commandments of God when you go to Ethiopia, and you don't begin to worship strange gods." And so forth and so forth. So they did the same thing now to Adrami and accompanied him on his way as far as the sea coast. So now Adrami is going to sail west in the Mediterranean to get to Rome. Now it's interesting that in Acts 27, verse 2, there's mention of a city called Adramitium. Adramitium. And St. Paul, while being taken a prisoner from Caesarea to Rome, embarked upon a ship belonging to Adramitium. You can find it in Acts chapter 27, verse 2. So I found it interesting that the name of this city on the western coast of Turkey, right, the seaport and city, a prominent city, was called Adramitium. It sounds very similar to Adrami, just that they added the tium to the end of it. And you probably will say, okay, I can see how the beginning of the name is similar to Adrami, but it's Adramitium. Now let me address that. Let me address that. Now, at the time of King David and Solomon, right? King David was alive during the 11th to 10th century BC. His kingdom flourished around the 10th century BC, right? And at that time, you had a language called Akkadian that was being spoken from the east all the way to the west to Turkey, from places like Babylon and Iran, those areas, modern Iran and Iraq, and those areas. They were speaking Akkadian. or a dialect, some dialect of Akkadian. So that Akkadian language, the script that they were being the script that they used, which is known as the cuneiform. Cuneiform is known as Sumer Akkadian script. Cuneiform. It's not Sumerian. It's not Akkadian. It's Sumer Akkadian cuneiform script. So that's why in Turkey you find these archaeological artifacts that are written with cuneiform, and the language is Akkadian. So an interesting thing about the Akkadian language I noticed, and now keep in mind I'm not an expert in Akkadian. However, from careful observation, I noticed that nouns, verbs, nouns and verbs um, that I know exist in the Hebrew language, that are found in the Ethiopic language, and even the Arabic language. I can find those same words in the Akkadian language, with one specific difference. They add um, the or to the end of the word. For example, you have Akkad, a city associated with Nimrod or Namrud, the son of Cush. The beginning of Namrod's kingdom was Akkad, Asher, Kalne, Babylon, or Babel. Right? So Akkad was one of those cities. The name Akkad in Akkadian is Akkadum. Akkadum also means Akkadian. You have Ab. In Hebrew, Ab means father. Also in Ethiopic, Ab means father. In Akkadian, they say Abum. You have El in Hebrew, and then you have Elum in Akkadian. You have Mishken in Hebrew, which means tabernacle, and then you have Mashkenum in Akkadian, which means dwelling place, right? Which Meshken in Hebrew also means dwelling place. So, you have Sar, which means king in Hebrew, and then in Akkadian they say Sarum. You have Man in Amharic, which is Ethiopia, or Menu in Ethiopic, and then in Akkadian you have Manum, which means who, and you have Min in Ethiopic or Amharic, and then you have Minum in Akkadian, which means what. You have Lisan in Ethiopic, and you have Lisanum, which means tongue in Akkadian. You have I in Ethiopic, which means where, like where are you going? You have I in Ethiopic, which means where, and in Akkadian you say Ayum, Ayum. You have Maser in Amharic, which means to bind or to arrest, and then in Akkadian you have Masarum, which means guards. And what guards do? They protect the place. If somebody's trying to break in or something, they'll bind them, they'll arrest them, they'll stop them, they'll restrict them, right? To protect the that city or person or building or whatever they're hired to protect. And then you have even in the numbers. So you have in Ethiopic you have Salis, which means third, and then you have Salsum in Akkadian. You have Rabe, which means fourth, and Rabum in Akkadian. Hamis, Hamsum, fifth. Sadis, sixth. Sadsum. Sabe, which means seventh. Sabum. So you see, even in the numbers, it's the same exact number. It's basically the same exact number as you see in the Ethiopic. They just added the to the end of the Akkadian ordinal number, right? And the cardinal numbers as well. You have Celestu in Ethiopic, which means three, and in Akkadian, Celestum. You have Arba'atu in Ge'ez or in Ethiopic, and then Arbatum in Akkadian. Hamistu in Ethiopic, Hamistum in Akkadian. Sitsatu, Sitsatum. Sebatu, Sebatum. Samintu, Samintum. Tesatu, Tesatum. Asertu, Asertum. So the Akkadian language has the sound added to end of the words. And again, I'm not an expert in Akkadian, so I can't explain what the rules are or why this occurs. I just noticed that, and then I thought about the name Adrami, the son of Solomon, right? He gets on a ship, he goes on to the west coast, takes a ship, heading to Rome, right, which would be Constantinople or Istanbul, and headed up that direction. And there's a city on that west coast of Turkey that's only not even 4 hours drive from Istanbul, called Adramitium. Adramitium, and it was an ancient seaport. So ships from Adramitium would carry people to Rome. And even in the Bible, you see Saint Paul traveled on a ship to Rome, and that ship was from Adramitium. So it would make sense to me that if Adrami is going on a ship and heading to Rome, he that ship would probably have docked in the port of Adramitium at some time, if that wasn't the final destination, and then from there they probably would head on horse or by chariot. You know, that I'm saying maybe, or maybe they took the ship all the way to Istanbul or Constantinople. However, we know Adramitium was an ancient seaport, and they had ships even up to the time of Saint Paul. They were still carrying travelers from Israel, or they're they're still carrying travelers to Rome. The ships of Adramitium. So I'm thinking that maybe that city was named after Adrami, and then because they named the city after Adrami, the Adrami became the king of Rome. He was according to the Kebra Nagast, Adrami became the king of Rome. And remember, Mira, the city of Mira, is also near to Adramitium. And Mira in the original language of that time, of the city of Mira, is actually called Erme, 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 Erme. Sounds like Rome, almost Erme. Not saying that it is. I'm just saying it's interesting that you have a city right by Adramitium that's called Erme, Erme, and then from Erme, right? You have Adramitium north of it, and then from Adramitium, when you go further north, you're in Istanbul. So on that western coast of Turkey, you have these three main major places that are very close together, just hours apart by car. Right? Put it like this: the distance from Adramitium to Istanbul, ancient Constantinople, is the distance from Miami, Florida, is less than the distance of Miami, Florida to Jacksonville, Florida, right? So they're very near, relatively near. So let's continue now with the Kebra Nagast, chapter 72. And they blessed him as they had blessed David his brother, and they admonished Adrami even as they had admonished David. And they accompanied him on his way as far as the sea coast. Therefore, again, we know Adrami traveled from the eastern coast, the sea coast of Israel, to Rome. And we have Saint Paul again traveling to Rome on a ship that belonged to Adramitium. You can find it in the New Testament in Acts 27 verse 2. So Solomon the king wrote and sent a letter saying, "Peace be to Baltasar," right? Or Beltesor, right? King of Rome. "Take my son Adrami and give him thy daughter, and make him king in the city of Rome." So Adrami is going to become king in the city of Rome. Thou did wish for a king of the seed of David my father, and I have done thy will. And I have sent unto thee his nobles, 14 on his right hand and 14 on his left. Who shall keep the law with him, and be subject unto thee according to thy will? And they arrived there with the ambassadors of the king of Rome, together with much splendor and all the equipment that was requisite for the country of Rome. And they came to the city of Rome to Baltasar, right? Beltasor. And they repeated all that Solomon had sent them to say, and delivered over to him his son. And Baltasor rejoiced exceedingly, and gave him his eldest daughter, whose name was Adlonia. And he made a great marriage feast according to the greatness of his kingdom, and established him over all his city of Rome. And he blessed him, for he was noble in stature, and his wisdom was marvelous, and he was exceedingly mighty in his strength. And one day Baltasar wished to test his knowledge in the trying of cases, when a man, the possessor of a vineyard, came to him and appealed to him, saying, My lord, Arsani the son of Yodad hath transgressed thy word, and hath laid waste my vineyard with his sheep. Now I found another interesting connection, right? Because now Bal Beltasor is going to test Adrami, right? Having him by having him judge a case, right? So this man is a possessor of a vineyard. He's coming with an appeal to Adrami. In Edramit, right? In Edramit, or Adramitum, there are vineyards and olive trees. Pliny the Elder states that in Edremit, the wooden huts occupied by Greek fishermen and by Turks are surrounded by vineyards and olive trees. Hence the chief trade is in olive oil, raisins, and timber. So the Kebra Nagast is matching up with what these historians are saying about Adramitium. It's a place where there are vineyards. And in the Kebra Nagast, Adrami is trying a case for a man who has a vineyard. And you may say, well, hey, look, in ancient times, who didn't have a vineyard, and it was everybody was farmers or whatever. But you have to admit, it's very interesting that in the Kebra Nagast, that is specifically a vineyard. The man who is coming to have his case heard by Adrami is the owner of a vineyard. And another thing that's interesting is the history of Adramitium. Adramitium is obscure. Its early history is not clear. So there is no definitive answer concerning its origins, and there are different theories about the founding of Adramitium. Interesting fact, there are coins which the locals pick up in the surrounding fields of Adramitium, and they're frequently used as aids in determining where historical sites are in Asia Minor. These coins were struck at Adramitium as late as the 3rd century AD, and sometimes in connection with Ephesus. Now, I'm no archaeologist, but just take a look at this coin here from Adramitium, and you, from what I see here, I'm looking at these letters, and it's almost like I see ADRAMY written there. What do you think, guys? I mean, just take a look for yourself. And Solomon the king wrote and sent a letter saying, "Peace be to Baltasar the king of Rome. Take my son Adrami and give him thy daughter, and make him king in the city of Rome. That thou did wish for a king of the seed of David my father, and I have done your will. And I have sent unto thee his nobles, 14 on his right hand and 14 on his left, who shall keep the law with him and be subject unto thee according to your will." And they arrived there with the ambassadors of the king of Rome, together with much splendor and all the equipment that was requisite for the country of Rome. And they came to the city of Rome to Baltasar the king, and they repeated all that Solomon had sent them to say, and delivered over to him his son. And Baltasar rejoiced exceedingly and gave him his eldest daughter, whose name was Adlonia. And he made a great marriage feast according to the greatness of his kingdom, and established him over all his city of Rome. And he blessed him, for he was noble in stature, and his wisdom was marvelous, and he was exceedingly mighty in his strength. And one day Balthasar wished to test his knowledge in the trying of cases, when a man, the possessor of a vineyard, came to him and appealed to him, saying, "My lord, Arsani the son of Yodad hath transgressed thy word, and has laid waste my vineyard with his sheep. And behold, I have seized his sheep, and they are in my house. What decision will thou come to in respect of me?" And the owner of the sheep came to the king and made an appeal to him, saying, "Give me back my sheep, for he has carried them off, because they went into his vineyard." And the king said unto them, "Go ye and argue your case before your king, Adrami, and whatsoever he shall say unto you, that do." And they went and argued their case before him. And Adrami asked the first, saying, "How much of the vineyard has the sheep eaten? How much of the vineyard have the sheep eaten? The leaves, or the tendrils, or the young grapes, or the shoots by the roots?" And the owner of the vineyard answered and said unto them, and the owner of the vineyard answered and said unto him, "They have eaten the tendrils and the branches that had grapes upon them, and there is nothing left of the vines except the twigs by the roots." And Adrami asked the owner of the sheep, saying, "Is this true?" And the owner of the sheep answered and said unto him, "My lord, they ate only the tendrils with leaves on them." And Adrami answered and said, "This man says that they ate the grapes. Is this true?" And the owner of the sheep answered and said, "No, my lord, but they ate the blossoms before they had formed into grapes."